Welcome, everyone, to our third webinar in our spring series on skills development and assessment. We're very pleased that you're joining us today for our focus on competency-based education, or CBE, and looking to case studies from our neighbors in the U.S. Before we begin, just some housekeeping. There will be a Q&A following the presentations at approximately 12:30 p.m. So please type your questions into the chat box for us to review. And the slides and recordings from the webinar will be posted on HECO's website, and you'll be notified when that takes place. For folks joining us who might not be familiar with HECO, we are an agency of the Ontario government. We were created in 2005 on the heels of Bob Ray's report, which reviewed post-secondary education in Ontario and recommended that an independent body be established to monitor the post-secondary system in Ontario and provide policy advice to government. We conduct research relating to our three priorities. The first is access. We look at improving access to higher education for underrepresented groups and providing supports to ensure all students have a chance to succeed once there. We also look at quality, which we define in terms of skills or learning outcomes, what Ontario post-secondary students know and what they can do. At HECO, we look at 4 types of learning outcomes: disciplinary knowledge, basic cognitive skills such as literacy and numeracy, higher order cognitive skills such as problem solving, and transferable skills such as teamwork and time management. Finally, we look at sustainability, where we seek to answer the question of how the Ontario post-secondary system can improve on efficiency and effectiveness without compromising on access or quality. We conduct internal research, and we also work in partnership with Ontario's colleges and universities to conduct research relating to our 3 priorities. All of our research is public and available on our website. Recently, HECO has looked into CBE, and we came across Laurie and Aaron, our presenters today. HECO has written a report on CBE that we will publish in the fall. And with that, I'll introduce our 2 panelists in today's webinar. Aaron Brower is the Provost and Vice Chancellor of UW Extension, a group that embodies the Wisconsin idea by partnering with groups across the state to bring education and research to Wisconsin, the nation, and the world. He created and led the UW Flexible Option, the program, which provides students with access to UW degrees and certificates through direct assessment, competency-based methods. Brower previously served as UW-Madison's Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning and remains a tenured professor at UW-Madison. He has written extensively on educational innovations, project-based learning, student learning, and outcome assessment. In 2006, he was named as one of the nation's outstanding first-year student advocates. Dr. Laurie Dodge is Vice Chancellor of Institutional Assessment and Planning and Vice Provost at Brandman University. She is the WASC Senior College and University Commission Accreditation Liaison Officer for Brandman University and serves on the WSCUC Substantive Change Committee. She is also the President of the Board of Directors for the Competency-Based Education Network, CBEN. She has presented nationally and internationally on competency-based education and co-authored the forthcoming book, A Leader's Guide to Competency-Based Education, From Inception to Implementation. In 2016, Dr. Dodge was named one of the 16 most innovative people in higher education by Washington Monthly. So first, we will let Aaron take it away.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Danielle, for that introduction, and I'm happy to be here and present to you all. Laurie and I are going to primarily talk about our programs, but I'm also going to spend just a few minutes setting a stage on why CBE is such a hot topic right now. I'm going to go through this very quickly. I imagine that you'll have access to these slides at a later time, but this is just to give you kind of touchstone points as we're going through. So higher education is in transition. That's no surprise to anyone. There is an increased need for higher education. The demographics of those who are seeking higher ed are changing. In the U.S. in particular, probably the same in Canada. The fiscal models are really changing for particularly public education and state funding. And then technology is changing everything, including higher education. The first slide is one that you've probably seen in different versions, but the point here is that more and more people require higher education in the workforce, and this has really changed very dramatically in the last 20, 30 years or so. In the U.S., the goal of the previous administration and also the Lumina Foundation is to have 65% of the country have some sort of post-secondary credential by the year 2025. Right now, we're about 20 points below that at about 45, 46%. I have Wisconsin numbers in here, too. When I give this talk, I localize it to Wisconsin. And the point here is that in order to go from 45 to 65%, it requires more people to get degrees than there literally are seats available if you total up all of the forms of higher education that exist right now. So, for example, in Wisconsin, that 20-point difference represents 1.2 million more people in Wisconsin who need a degree. And if you total up all the seats available across all forms of higher ed in Wisconsin, there's about 350,000. So you need a different kind of model to address this gap. There are more people coming to college. This is the second point about demographics changing. But the people that are coming to college look like the woman on the right side of this picture, not her two teenage college-age kids. And this, actually, I like this picture. This is Carla Lundeen, who is our very first graduate in the nursing program from UW-Flex. And it just really illustrates, she's the person now who's the largest segment of the population seeking higher ed in addition to her kids. And there's some statistics there about how different the U.S. College-seeking population is. 75% of them are not what we would consider traditional. A third of them are working full-time. 25% are parents, etc. What is it that these new students want? They want, they're driven by career advancement. They're focused on lower tuition and fees. They want a self-paced program. They want to get credit, not necessarily course credit, but recognition for the work and the life experiences that are applicable to their program. They want to accelerate through. They want to test out. The main point is you need different kinds of educational models for the different students who are there, and those students are going to need different kinds of supports too. And Laurie and I will talk about that aspect as well. Third change in the U.S. in particular, again, I'm assuming this is the same in Canada. The funding, state funding in particular, has been on a steady decline for higher education since the heyday in the late 70s, early 80s. And this decline, and that's the blue line, is the national, and Wisconsin is the red. This line is in steady decline, regardless of whether there were Republicans or Democrats in power in the states. It also is regardless of whether it was good or bad economic times in the U.S. It really has to do with how state budgets are structured and the competition for state funds, particularly with mandated entitlement and healthcare costs that continue to grow and basically push other things out from higher education. And then the last point is technology is changing everything. And I'm sure people have seen these kinds of slides. I picked this one out because it represents the change, radical change in some ways, between even last year and this year. So this is per minute how much activity on these different segments in technology. And look at Netflix just as an example, which I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's this one right here, kind of at 10 o'clock. Last year, 70,000 hours watched, which itself every minute, that's, staggering. But this year, it's 266,000 hours watched. It's just, it's just staggering. And again, the point here is that we're all awash in information with the internet. And that's a big change in higher education, where it used to be the case that faculty essentially provided access to information for students. Access is no longer the issue. It's all about how to determine good information from bad, how to apply information from one setting to another, how to solve problems, in some cases how to create new information. But it's really gone from a kind of information transmission model to a one about application, project-based learning. I use this slide almost as a joke line. This is a painting of 13th century University of Bologna, and you immediately recognize it as a classroom, right? You've got the faculty member up front, the graduate students at his feet, eager students in the front, the ones who are either talking or sleeping in the back. It's really kind of amazing how little has changed in our traditional view of what education is over the last almost 1,000 years. But of course, higher ed has really changed, and these are pictures that I pulled off of the UW-Madison website. There's a field class and an anthropology lab and an internship program in our state capital, just to illustrate that lots of things are changing, even if our institutions haven't quite caught up. So, future of higher education, accessible to new populations, need for new funding models built around project-based learning, and need to blend technology with face-to-face in the best ways possible. Okay, so enter competency-based education. And the big change in competency-based education is a move from a credit hour to competency-based learning. The way we think about it is it moves from a focus on time being the constant, right? You've got a 16-week semester, let's say, and students will have a variety of learning outcomes within that 16 weeks, to a competency-based model, particularly in what's called the direct assessment competency model, where students have a set amount of material to master, and they can do that quickly or slowly based on a whole lot of different factors. I'm going to skip this one for time. Our program is called the UW Flexible Option. This is a screenshot from the website. I like this picture so much. It's just a very cute one. But the basic point of our UW Flex Option program, it's called it's direct assessment, which is a version of CBE, and it removes itself entirely from the credit hour from classes. We have projects and competency sets which enumerate what the learning outcomes are for students in an area of a curriculum, and students then work their way through essentially doing projects which are then evaluated by faculty. In the UW system, these are partnership programs, so that UW Extension provides the support to, for example, UW Milwaukee, who offers the nursing program. So it's the same College of Nursing faculty who are evaluating students and developing the competency areas. And the competency areas are built from the exact same program level competencies, program level outcomes in their traditional Bachelor's of Science in Nursing program. We use a backwards design to develop the curriculum. In other words, the same BSN curriculum, and you go backwards instead of to develop courses, to develop projects that illustrate student learning on those program level outcomes. The faculty are exactly the same faculty that would be teaching normally in the face-to-face program, but we use what's called an unbundled role. So instead of a faculty member doing course development and grading and teaching, we have different faculty, in the case of nursing, within that College of Nursing. Some develop the curriculum, some are evaluating student projects, and others are doing the tutoring when needed. The students subscribe to a 3-month period of work time, And those are different from a semester or a quarter because there's nothing magic that happens at the beginning and at the end of that 3-month period. It's not like there's a final at the end of the 3 months. It's more like a gym membership or a magazine subscription where you just continue to roll forward as you're working on projects. Students can start at the beginning of any month of the 12-month calendar. So if you start in January, you start a 3-month subscription period, January, February, March. You can go right ahead into April. You could take a month off and start in May. So it's a very flexible program. We have one pricing model for student subscriptions. So in our case, it's $2,250 regardless for that 3 months, regardless of whether students can complete 2 projects or 6 projects. The business model is that it's made as a cost recovery model. There was initial seed money that we got from our UW system and from our state, and then the expectation that the whole thing breaks even and even begins to generate revenue within a 5-year period, and we're on task for that. And then the no asterisk on the diploma is that it was really important that that diploma for a nursing student in the FLEX program does not say UW Milwaukee FLEX option Bachelor of Science in Nursing. It just says UW Milwaukee Bachelor of Science of Nursing. These are the partners that we have across the UW, and down below are the programs that we have. So we have about 8 programs and 3 certificates at this point. And then the programs started enrolling students in January of 14, so we're about 3.5 years, not quite in, and we have well over 5,500 students, subscriptions, which represent now that's close to 2,000 students. The retention is quite high, particularly because these are open access programs. So 72% as opposed to typically it's less than half that for the kind of students who are coming in. The type of student is exactly who we had intended this to be, so it's an adult student, most women, most working part or full-time. Most are in the state or the region, and that's, again, intended. We have almost 300 graduates now. And in terms of financials, we're grossing over $6.5 million, and we're, again, scheduled to break even actually next year in our 4th year. There's a ton of changes that happen and things you need to be aware of if you're going to build a CBE program. In the U.S., the state and federal policies have not yet caught up with these CBE programs. Financial aid is a particularly difficult thing to accomplish in these CBE programs, and we've been working directly with the Department of Ed and our regional accreditor to get our programs accredited, and they have been, more than willing to work with us, but the rules need changing in order to make that easier. There's very little back office work that was off the shelf to enable competency-based work. So just as one example, transcripts look different in this model, and we had to basically build a transcription system ourselves using kind of reprogramming PeopleSoft. And then there's really a lot of institutional culture changes that have to take place in order to support CBE. I talked about very quickly the unbundled faculty role. We have a new support role also for students, which is just critically important. We call it an academic success coach, but it's some version of coaching that, and Laurie will talk about that as well. And integrating these workload changes into university life is a challenge. And there's just a ton of things like that, how admissions works, how the bursar functions work. You name it, there's really a lot of changes when you move away from the credit. Okay, so that's about it for me, and I know there's plenty of questions, and we'll take them at the end once Laurie's done as well, and assuming I can figure out how to drag this presenter icon to you, Laurie, then I will pass it off to you. And it looks like that's working.
Hi, everyone. Erin, thank you so much for the telling us about UW Extension programs and, most importantly, the why of CBE and what's happening in the nation. So it's really good to have that national context, and I appreciate that. As Erin said, we're coming from two different institutions and have different models of competency-based education. So I'm going to do a little deeper dive into what Brandman's competency-based education program looks like, and you'll see similarities between Brandman and UW's model. So again, thank you, and it's great to have this opportunity. So it's important when you're thinking about competency-based education programs is the model that you choose and how that fits in your institutional culture. And I already saw a question pop up in the chat box about that, so hopefully we can address that in the Q&A. So Brandman University is part of the Chapman University system. We are nonprofit and designed for working adults. 87% are working adults, some of the things that Erin talked about, the criteria, people that are working, have families, balancing school, all at the same time. 48% of our students are first generation. So the first ones in their families to graduate from college. 31% are active duty or veterans. So we have a pretty big military. We also are a Hispanic serving institution, so about 30% of our students are Latino. Our degree programs range from associate to doctoral programs, so we have a wide range. Our delivery model is hybrid, so if you see that little map there, we have over 25 locations in the state of California and Washington. About 7 years ago, we changed all of our on-ground courses to hybrid, which means that half are online and half are face-to-face. We also have fully online programs throughout the nation, and then our newest model, which is competency-based education programs. We have 2 baccalaureate degrees, a Bachelor of Business Administration, which has 5 different emphasis areas, and then a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology. So I'd like to highlight and get you in the weeds a little bit to see what does this look like. The Brandman My Path, which is our competency-based education program, I'm going to highlight the Bachelor of Science in Information Systems and Technology program. Now, this program is comprised of 39 competencies, and those competencies include both your general education, so your first year and a half or 2 years of university, learning things like English and math and, humanities, plus the information technology core. In this degree program, there are 17 IT certifications that may count for academic credit. And when a student graduates from the program, they also walk away with 6 certifications that are embedded in the programs, both the instruction and the examination. So the program, Brandman My Path, is affordable. It's, as Erin said, that's what students are looking for now. It's self-paced, so students move through that competency at their own pace, and then it has final assessment. So let's just do a little more deep dive into what this looks like. So our program is fully online, which many competency-based education programs are, but not all. Some also have physical requirements, whether that be internship or kind of study labs. So there's various models, and again, it depends on what aligns to your institutional culture and the program. So this is a student's view. If they were going into competency modules, this is an example of the fundamentals of consumer behavior. So on this landing page, a student would see all the objectives, the learning objectives. They would see a full syllabus, and then they would see the tutorial faculty, contact information. The faculty that work with the students in the competency-based education program at Brandman are all full-time faculty. Our full-time faculty in the CBE program are a little bit different model than our full-time faculty in our credit hour program. Their primary responsibility is teaching and learning and working with the student. Similar to what Erin talked about, it's an unbundled faculty model. So you may have different faculty that built the module, teaching and learning experience, and different faculty that grade students' final assessment. So tutorial faculty, they're right there, discipline-specific with the student. All content is built within the competencies right in this platform. We use Sage Learning. So there's no textbook fee, which really helps. I was at a bookstore the other day at a university and could not believe how expensive textbooks were. So this is a huge benefit to students. The content is organized by objectives. So it kind of guides the student's educational journey. A student goes and, works with the learning material. They do milestone activities, which may be assessments. And then when they pass those assessments, it goes to the next level. These assessment questions, so students are answering questions, also render not only are you correct, but it also looks at competence level. And we'll talk a little bit about that on this next slide. Final assessments. This is incredibly important in competency-based education programs because it's mastery of these assessments that render whether a student has passed and is ready to move on. So they need to be reliable and valid. Brandman University's My Path program has really two major types of assessments. One is a final assessment may be objective-based, and that's probably what we're similar to seeing, multiple choice or fill in the blank, so objective-based. On these objective-based assessments, these are on-demand remote proctoring. So students can be anywhere, anytime, anywhere, and take their examinations. There's a robust student authentication system that's part of the platform with test security, because you need to ensure as a university is that the student that's receiving the degree that also is taking this examination. We also have project-based final assessments. These are authentic assessments. Students can see exactly what they need to do. There's accessible instructions. There's a rubric that's applied when the faculty are evaluating these. So those are our major types of final assessments, in addition to some standardized certification examinations as final assessments. As part of the platform, students we've built in adaptive learning and personalized lessons. And I kind of want to walk through, because sometimes there's confusion. What's the difference between competency-based education and online education, or what we call distance learning? Well, in the competency-based, it's self-paced. So a student would go through an assessment, so they're going to answer these questions, and they're not only going to answer the question, but they're also going to mark whether they're confident or not confident in their response. So after they take the assessment, the analysis comes up. It shows the student what is the correct answer, whether they had it, and it also looks at whether they were confident. Based upon that, There's algorithms that's built into the system that then guides students to the areas that they did not know. So you don't have to go through material that you already know. It actually goes to content that you're not confident or did not get correct. So in that way, the student's journey is customized. As Erin said, data analytics are a big part of competency-based education. At Brandman My Path, tutorial faculties and academic coaches have access to over 20 different reports, so they can look at where are students getting stuck. Is it in a particular objective? What was the activity that they were stuck in? What was their did they pass? How long did they spend in that content? So there's a plethora of data to help watch that student's educational journey. We can also use that to improve the activities. If there's a lot of students getting stuck, then maybe we need to add something to the curriculum. So I think these reports are incredibly important. Academic coaches, Erin talked about. So in competency-based programs, the majority of them have your full-time faculty that are working with students in content. So if I'm a tutorial faculty in English, I'm working with all of the competencies in English and all the students. But academic coaches are what I kind of call advisors on steroids. They're the ones that are working with the students' engagement. Do they have any questions? Hey, it's been a week since you've been in the platform. Can you tell me what's going on? So they can kind of watch. And then a big piece also, which you'll see on the left side of the screen, students can look at their pace. So within a competency, they can see, okay, here's the objective, how much time have I spent, and how close am I to completing that. So the last slide here, because I know you want to ask questions, is how did Brandman develop their competency-based program? What was our design? Similar to UW, we use backward design, and what that means is thinking about the outcomes first. So when I used to teach, it was you had a textbook, you had a syllabus, you were teaching, and then we're like, oh, I have to give an exam, so I better build that. In backward design, you're actually thinking of the assessment first. What should students master? And then you build the educational journey to support that. So we use backward design. Our faculty built the curriculum. We use what is called framework origin. So looking at, what are the different frameworks in these pieces of learning? We use the Department of Labor ONET data, which has the knowledge, skills, and abilities required for certain careers and professions. We use degree qualification profiles, which is 21st century skills, things like applied learning, cultural understanding. We use American Association Colleges and Universities, AAC&U, essential learning outcomes, critical thinking is an example. Industry-specific certifications. So what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities to pass that certification exam? So all of these pieces, faculty looked at this, knitted this together to build the competency program. Once a draft of that was done, we talked to our employers, our advisory board, and said, what's missing, what's the good pieces, and most especially, would you hire this person? So we also are a direct assessment. I know Erin had a quick slide on that, which means that our program was approved by the regional accreditor and the U.S. Department of Education for financial aid. That's the program that really uncouples time, and it's all about student learning. So we have a 6-month subscription period that students can, complete as many competencies they can at a certain tuition rate, which is a lot less expensive than our normal one. So at this time, so I know that we can get to questions, I think I moved the ball. we're going to try this, to higher education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurie. And thanks too to Erin. We're now opening the virtual floor to questions. So we'll read out loud questions submitted through the chat box for our panelists. Please note that we may not get to every question, but we do aim to facilitate stimulating and enriching conversation. So with that, we'll start with our first question. Is there any data available that compares completion rates in CBE programs with face-to-face traditional programs?
Do you want to throw a question to one or the other? Or you want us to just jump in?
Why don't you both address that one if you're comfortable, or whoever would like to go first. Erin, if you'd like to start.
Sure. We actually got some funding from Lumina Foundation to do a direct comparison. So the nursing program was one well-established program with lots of students in it that we did comparisons to. And what we found is that so student learning actually was about the same between the face-to-face and the flex version, with some learning outcomes better. The applied learning outcomes were better, and that made sense because students were actually working on projects. And by projects, I mean like a community health project where you're evaluated on things like presentational style, as well as quality of the data and research presentation and engagement with community and stuff like that. So yeah, there has been. And then in terms of the completion rates, our completion rates are just much higher than the standard models. And it has, I believe, everything to do with the coaches who are there, every step of the way with students. Just one quick thing about the coaches. So these are master's level trained people who, as Laurie says, kind of advisors on steroids. So for us, it's a combination of advising, low-level tutoring, so the kind of tutoring you might get at a writing center or a math center, and then some life coaching, help with time management and stuff. And these are assigned one-to-one to students when they are admitted, and they follow the student through the remainder of their career in the program. It's about an 85-to-1 ratio of students to coach, and we pay them well. And if you were to look at our budget, the coaching line is a lot of our budget, and it's to recognize the fact that the support that you have to give to students is just really super critical.
So this is Laurie. So thank you, Erin. The piece I would add is there's also a national study by the American Institutes for Research that are looking at several universities to address this question. Exactly what you're saying. Are students learning the same in CBE programs as credit hour, and what is their graduation, retention? So that data is not out yet. Brandman's part of that. So kind of watch that's another source to help answer that question.
Thanks. Okay, our next question. Can you speak more about the challenges of changing your institutional operating model and culture from an industrialized assembly line configuration to a competency-centric approach? So how did you address things like scheduling, faculty resources, workload management, et cetera, in this system overhaul? And maybe, Laurie, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So the journey for Brandman University is there was a couple things that were in place, which I think really helped facilitate the movement to CBE. One is that we had what I call really strong assessment bones or assessment foundation. So it was already part of our culture and faculty's culture to assess program learning outcomes, to think about how you build your courses, and how do you assess student learning. So that was a big piece. The other big piece for us was about 7 years ago, we changed all of our on-ground courses to the hybrid so that there was technology in every course. So faculty and students we're used to technology. So I think those were two pieces that helped facilitate. The other piece that helped was Brandman University, prior to 2008, was one of the 7 colleges of Chapman University. So in 2008, we became separately accredited. So we had this huge kind of feel for innovation as a kind of a new university. So I think it was energized. A key for us, with all of that kind of context setting, a key for us is to include faculty leaders within the whole process. And we did also conducted a lot of research on what are best models for teaching and learning. So we, asked those questions through research, which I think helped with faculty kind of coming on board. Faculty were given releases, workload releases, to develop competency and or compensation. So it wasn't one more thing on their plate. It actually, they could kind of trade out. So we didn't overwhelm them in workload. So I'll punt to you, Aaron.
Yeah, so just to reinforce 2 things you said. So engaging faculty early is critical, and then paying them, or at least giving them a reassignment so it's not added on. But I'll say this, that dealing with faculty workload, particularly for us in our model where we're using our standard faculty who have standard faculty workloads in each of the UWs, UW Milwaukee, Madison, UW Green Bay, etc. This is a real challenge, and particularly as we continue to scale up. So the initial way in which faculty were dealing with this is that they would teach in Flex as an overload. And that was fine as long as the numbers were manageable. And they sort of approached it, although we kept telling them not to, as if these were independent study students. And you probably all know what that means in terms of level of involvement with the student. We've had to become very systematized about what the expectations are for faculty. And then particularly as the scaling grows, some faculty have to literally get reassigned rather than an overload. And those things are helping. And then the last thing I'll say is these programs are really, the typical way in which faculty teach, and I was 25 years as a faculty member like Laurie as well, is that I owned my course and I had great pride in the course that I developed. These programs are really owned by the department or the school or college. So the nursing program is really owned, so to speak, by that College of Nursing. And they have to approach it, therefore, as an entire college rather than individual faculty doing work for this program. Because there's a lot of, we require that feedback on student projects is within a 72-hour period, and that's 365 days out of the year. So, people go on vacation or they get sick or they just, kind of go, the hell with this, I want to do something else. And the college has to come forward with a way to manage the load rather than individually on specific faculty.
Thank you to you both. Our next question, are there any fields of study or levels of study, like undergrad versus grad programs, that are better suited for CBE? And are there any fields of study or levels of study that are not suited for CBE?
Yeah, you want me to start? So I think actually any is possible. We are driven by providing the kinds of degrees that are most in demand, and those are professionally oriented. So professionally oriented programs are easiest to do in this model. But we also have an associate's degree program that does essentially the gen eds. And so we teach, basic chemistry through this and writing and other things. We do have a master's program in the works. We have another one that's in a planning stage. So in terms of level, it's not really, that's not a barrier. We've got certificates, which are, sort of sub-baccalaureate degrees. It's mostly for us, we're driven by demand and what are the areas that are in highest demand for these prospective students.
Erin, I agree wholeheartedly. I think Brandman's approach also is, what are the in-demand degrees? If you look at, what competency-based education programs are available throughout the state, I think the three areas that tend to be more common are in the health field, in the information technology, and the business field. But having said that, I can tell you that Northern Arizona University has a very robust liberal studies competency-based education program. So it can be any level, any degree. I think that in demand is really important, but also thinking about your institutional culture. Are there particular colleges, faculty that may be more receptive if this is a difficult pill to swallow? That may be a good start also.
Yeah, good point.
How do practices like textbook resources need to change to accommodate non-traditional learners in a digital age? We start with you, Erin.
Well, we're trying, both Laurie and I were making the point that this prospective student is very cost conscious, and they do a lot of shopping, by the way. So, there is a real price sensitivity here. So our cost, the $22.50 for 3 months, is pretty much an all-inclusive price. So we're looking for open educational resources and other resources that are available to students. And we frankly expect that materials will be available. Part of the great thing about the World Wide Web is there's use a colloquial term, a crap load of material out there. And then the faculty who are building the curriculum are really trying to evaluate what's the good stuff from the bad. And so they curate, is the word we use, the materials that are then made available to students. So textbooks, we're kind of unbundling all these experiences and trying to piece together the perfect one. So we very rarely use an entire textbook, and instead are trying to cobble together the right kind of materials for the different projects and programs.
So this is Laurie. That's very similar, Erin, to what we have at Brandman My Path. We do use open education resources. Actually, in all of our programs, there are no textbooks. So all of the content is digital throughout our programs. Students are access videos, journals, and also faculty create some of the curriculum, and/or we purchase, based upon faculty recommendations, some digital materials that are embedded in the platform. So for students, no additional cost. And I think I'm smiling because I remember when all of us were teaching and and you had a book and you tell students, read pages this through this, but you don't need to look at this. So in this way, in competency-based education, you actually can customize what those learning activities are instead of being dependent on how a textbook and how it's presented. So I think there's true benefit, and our faculty have really enjoyed that creativity, I think, in developing the curriculum.
What has the employer or industry reaction been to your institution's CBE programs? Want to start, Laurie?
Sure. So at Brandman My Path, I think an important piece for us was we had the advisory board. Our home location is in Southern California, Orange County, so lots and lots of businesses in that region. And so having the big employers around the table in building this program and talking about this program was really important. That way they know when a graduate, when they're looking at hiring a graduate, they know what the program is. So you can't communicate enough, early to get the buy-in. As Erin said, though, a student's transcript diploma does not say came from a competency-based education program. That's a delivery model. Students' transcript. We have dual transcripts, probably like a lot of CBE programs. So you have all of your competencies are crosswalked back to credit hour. So you have a more traditional looking transcript because we know that's the currency today is credit hour in higher education. But students also have a competency transcript, which is digital, which they can share and has metadata, which they can share with employers. So, Aaron.
Just to add to, so everything Laurie says, our model, UW Flex, has advisory boards, that's too strong a word, but advisors in the industry per program. So we talk to healthcare, to hospitals and healthcare agencies for the nursing program, and we have IT firms working on our IT program, et cetera. The employers really have loved the directness to the learning outcomes. So like Laurie, we have a dual transcript, a traditional one, and then a CBE one. And the CBE one is really valuable to them because they can see what the actual learning outcomes are. And frankly, the online version has links to the project. So it's like a portfolio that the student can bring forward to an employer, and they just love that stuff. I was looking at a prior question about copyright and the fair dealing issues around open source resources, and the writer is right that these programs are vulnerable to that. But the other part of it is for us, and I'm sure this is true for Laurie too, we have a regular update schedule on all the materials that we, either the curated materials or our projects or the assessments that we use, and so they're continually being updated and refreshed, and using what's out there and not using what's not good, let alone what there may be contentious copyright or IP issues around. So just to throw that into another question.
Given that this is such an individualized approach to learning, are there ways to regulate the student experience? Aaron, would you like to go first?
Say more what you mean about regulate.
Well, I'm not sure. The person who asked the question did not specify more what they meant about regulating the student experience. I guess we're thinking more about maintaining the quality that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, for these programs, they're outcome based. So truly, have you developed good and complete sets of competencies? So not just technical competencies, but communication and problem solving and all the good liberal education foundation that we believe is important. And then the second part, our assessments have to be really good and not just reliable but valid. They have to really do what they are meant to do. And so we put a lot of energy, and this is true across the board with the quality CBE programs, put a lot of energy into the quality of the competencies and the assessments. In terms of standardizing the student experience, part of the real innovation here is that students need customized experiences, and if they can, and we find this with our IT programs in particular, students can come in and they can, knock through 3 or 4 projects in the span of a couple weeks because they know how to build a website. They know how to, optimize some of the searching functions that might be part of the project. And that's just fine. Why would we make them sit for a whole semester if they truly know how to do this? Again, it requires outcomes and assessments that are really well done. But anyway, it's really the quality is got to be tagged to the outcomes that you're looking for and the completeness of that set of outcomes. And then, of course, supporting students through so they're not getting lost or, hitting brick walls.
All right, and I'll just add that some of you may have noticed that Laurie responded to a question about what LMS is used at Brandman, and she responded in the chat box that they use Sagent's Learning as their LMS. So that was a question that came in from a participant. So I think that it's kind of wrapping things up. We're coming to the close of our webinar. Thank you all so much for being so engaged and asking such great questions of our panelists. And thank you especially to Aaron and Laurie for such great presentations and really enriching content. I think this will definitely be something that a lot of folks return to rewatch this webinar, to take lots of this in. So thank you to Aaron and to Laurie for their time this afternoon. And we'd also like to kind of end things by reminding participants that we have the slides and presentations from our previous two webinars on real-world challenges in Neuro-integrated learning and rubric adaptation on our website at HECO.ca. And these slides and recording from this webinar will also be up, and you'll be notified when that takes place. And with that, thank you. Thank you to Aaron and Laurie, and hope everyone enjoys a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much.